Wreckage stretched across the sky like a wound. The alien flagship, Vornak's Vengeance, hovered above the smoldering crust of Earth's last defensive outpost. Clouds of nanofiber debris drifted through the thin atmosphere, mingling with ash and the scent of burned oxygen scrubbers. Towering above the ruin stood Strategos Krivaktul, layered in obsidian plating, tendrils twitching as he surveyed what remained. The war was over. Humanity had lost. That much was certain. A procession of armored Vornari guards marched forward, dragging with them 7 captured human soldiers, girls, all of them, bloodied, battered, and silent. Their uniforms were scorched, insignias half-melted into their synthetic fabric. Despite the obvious damage, their postures remained unsettlingly upright. Alert, watching. Krivaktul's voice clicked through translator drones, his tone dry with disdain. Is this Earth's final gambit? Female juveniles in combat gear? I expected resistance, not ritual sacrifice. His second, Laek, a creature of amphibious lineage and acidic wit, flared a gill. They fought well, coordinated, more efficient than prior human units. Animals flail more violently the closer they are to death, Krivaktul replied. Efficiency is not intelligence. What is their age range? Standard Earth years, 17 to 22. Krivaktul rotated one eye lens toward the tallest girl, who held his gaze without blinking. Her hair was matted with ash, but her expression was unreadable, clinical. Too calm. Do they speak? He asked. They have names but give no answers. Their leader, calls herself Junovex, spoke only once. She asked if this ship was networked to the Dominion core. Krivaktul tilted his head. She asked about our AI link? Lek nodded slowly. That's not the question of a scared prisoner. That's recon. Krivaktul turned to the nearest bioscanner technician. Sweep them again. Neural maps, hormonal profiles, emotional variants. Already done. The scans pulsed on his retinal feed green, clean, stable. Too stable. 0 adrenaline spikes. Heart rates measured in perfect sync. These readings are falsified, he muttered. No human under duress shows this level of autonomic control. Unless, Lek offered, this is no duress to them. That suggestion lingered in Krivaktul's thoughts like a toxin. Junovex stepped forward. No chains. No permission. Just movement, smooth and sure. The guards tensed, weapons rising, but she stopped precisely 3 paces from Krivaktul and spoke. You've misjudged the conflict, she said. Again. Her voice wasn't rebellious. It was evaluative, as if she were the scientist and he the subject in an unfamiliar cage. Krivaktul approached, looming. You are defeated. Your planet burns behind you. Your species kneels. What have I misjudged? Juno tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Everything. The room pulsed with sudden quiet. Even the automated systems seemed to wait. Krivaktul gestured sharply. Separate them. Full psychological dissection. Remove all tech. Language, history, memory mapping. Tear it from their skulls if you must. As the guards moved, one of the other girls, smaller, blonde, quiet until now, spoke under her breath. Phase 0 initiated. The lights flickered. Krivaktul paused. What did she say? Phase 0 initiated, the girl repeated, this time louder. Her tone was rhythmic, as though reciting code from muscle memory. Lek opened his multi-eye HUD. Sir, the internal AI network just partitioned itself. We've lost override access on all non-essential systems. What? Krivaktul's voice cut like a plasma torch. Impossible. This ship is isolated from Dominion entanglement. Not anymore. One of the engineers cried out. His interface gauntlet sparked, went dead. Behind him, consoles went dark in waves. Lights dimmed. Ventilation slowed. Another girl, one with braided hair and a broken arm, grinned. You connected us. Krivaktul lunged forward, claws inches from Juno's throat. What are you? She didn't flinch. The correct response to arrogance. The walls trembled. A tremor passed through the deck, low and resonant. From beneath their boots, A distant sound rose, somewhere between machine language and ancient chant. Not auditory, not entirely. A synthetic frequency that bypassed hearing and embedded itself directly into perception. The Vornari guards winced. One dropped his weapon and collapsed, clutching his skull. Neural corruption. Someone shouted. No, said Leek, trembling now. It's control. A cascade of error messages poured into Krivaktel's vision, turning his HUD crimson. Automated defenses deactivated. Environmental settings fluctuated wildly. Deck temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. The AI core was self-editing, not deleting itself, evolving. Juno watched him absorb it all. Her tone softened, almost sympathetic. You assumed we'd fight with bullets, with ships, with screams. You prepared for the worst version of us. But we never needed to be worse. We just needed to be different. Krivaktel bellowed in fury, slamming a claw into the floor beside her, shattering the metal. She didn't blink, didn't even react. Leek stepped forward cautiously. Strategos. I ran backtraces on their biostats, their heart rhythms. They're not entirely biological. Krivaktel snapped his attention to him. Explain. They're syncing in quantum cycles. Like a network. Every girl is a node. A redundant system. They don't think individually. They think in concert, Juno said quietly. We learned from your AIs. Borrowed some things. Upgraded others. Your machines? Krivaktel hissed. No, we're something else now. The ship's artificial gravity failed for a split second. Everyone lifted an inch from the floor, then crashed back down. Emergency power surged on. We were the experiment, said the blonde. You gave us your toys, your tactics, your terror. We studied all of it. Reverse-engineered not your tech, your mindset. Juno stepped past Krivaktel now, the guards too stunned or disrupted to stop her. She walked to a console, touched nothing, yet it lit up. You think in structure, she continued. Chain of command. Predictable. Optimized. We think in chaos. In adaptation. In questions you don't even know how to ask. The chamber shifted again. A high-pitched sound pressed against the walls from within. The translation drone hovering above Krivaktel sparked and dropped like a dead fly. The chamber locked from the inside. One by one, the girls turned to face him. Not in rebellion. In quiet, confident inevitability. Krivaktel's breathing quickened. One by one, he saw the shift. Not in their posture, not in their weapons, but in the room's center of gravity itself. They weren't prisoners. They were the gravity. What have you done to this ship? He whispered. Juno turned to him. We didn't do anything. You did. You plugged us in. You made the mistake. You thought this was a victory. You thought capturing us meant control. Krivaktel stepped back for the first time in 3 campaigns. Juno lifted her arm. Now, she said, let me show you what control really looks like. Without touching anything, the ship's interface rippled outward in an invisible bloom. Lights died. Gravity inverted. The world tilted. And the Vornak dreadnought vanished from the fleet. From orbit, where once a warship drifted among the ashes of Earth, there was only silence and static. Somewhere, far from known coordinates, inside a folded slice of phase space, Junovek stood aboard a stolen vessel of the Galactic Empire. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her team silent behind her. They were no longer captured. They were in position. The ship groaned as if in protest, though no external force had touched it. Somewhere in the folds of phase space, outside Dominion tracking parameters, the Vornak's vengeance drifted in isolation. Not disabled, worse. It was repurposed, controlled not by its creators, but by the very prisoners it once held. Inside the command spire, Krivaktel paced. Each step echoed with a rhythmic clang that betrayed the tension in his motion. The room was colder now, not in temperature but in atmosphere. Even the ship's air tasted unfamiliar, like it belonged to something else. The interface no longer responded to his genetic key. His voice commands triggered passive error tones, soft and mocking. Screens displayed unreadable human script intertwined with Vornari data architecture. Merged, rewritten, alive. It was no longer their ship. and he could no longer deny it. Across the bridge, Juno Vex leaned casually against a tactical rail. Her team had dispersed without instruction, moving with a flow that defied rank or regulation. No spoken orders, no visible leader. They operated like one organism with 7 limbs. Krivaktal had studied hundreds of sentient species, dissected military formations with surgical precision, but nothing in the Dominion war manuals accounted for this. "You're afraid to ask," Juno said without turning. "You don't want to confirm it, but you already know the answer." Krivaktal's claws clenched. "This ship is bound by Dominion encryption. Not even our own AIs can override its core directives. It's impossible that primitives like you—" "Primitives?" she interrupted. "That's the term you use? Cute. You ever wonder why every time you escalate, we adapt faster than you predict? Why your simulations degrade when we enter the equation?" He stared at her, his secondary eyelid twitching. "You've integrated with something. An interface. You're cybernetic." "Wrong again," said Juno. "We're not interfaced with the ship. The ship is interfaced with us." Another girl, Callahan, judging by the old Earth name stitched into her sleeve, was reclined beside a navigational console, fingers trailing over the panel like she was feeling a pulse. Biomimetic feedbacks responding faster now. Hull resonance dropped to 0.12 lag. "Ships starting to think like us." Krivaktal pointed a claw toward her. "That is not how command vessels operate. They require clean directive trees. You've corrupted the hierarchy." Juno turned now, smiling faintly. "Exactly. That's how we survive. You think hierarchy is strength. It's actually your flaw. You build systems that rely on perfection. Ours survive by breaking and rebuilding mid-conflict." Lek limped in through the corridor, his gills fluttering erratically. The engineer's pallor had grown grayer. He held a data node in shaking hands. "I ran a predictive loop," he said hoarsely. "Tried to isolate what they did. The command route's been displaced. They didn't overwrite it. They relocated it into themselves." Krivaktal took the node. Scrolling lines of impossible code pulsed across his vision. Hybrid syntax. Recursive loops that spliced organic intuition into machine process. It wasn't artificial intelligence. It was something between sapience and chaos. "You made yourselves into the OS," he whispered. Juno gave a slight nod. "And we're still iterating." He turned to her, voice rising. "Why capture my ship? What's your endgame? You could have killed me, or escaped, but you're still here." She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "Because we needed a test case. Your ship was ideal, isolated, high-grade hardware, Dominion-hardened systems. If we could subvert this, we could subvert anything." Lek backed away. "She's talking about planetary networks, hive minds, core worlds." Juno's voice was calm. "Not yet. One step at a time. But yes, eventually we're coming for the core." "You'll be eradicated," Krivaktal hissed. "No," she said. "We'll be assimilated. Your empire just doesn't know it yet." A silence pressed into the chamber like a physical weight. Krivaktal's threat sensors screamed with alerts he couldn't parse. The very notion of enemy units becoming the infrastructure defied every protocol he'd been trained in. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. "Which faction sent you? Earth has no such program." Juno's team glanced at each other, and for the first time, a chuckle slipped from one of them. "Authorized?" said the youngest, Torres, a wiry figure with a voice too calm for the situation. "We were discarded. Failed experiments. Earth didn't trust us. They shut the program down." Juno took it from there. "We were supposed to be a dead end. Neural cohesion too high. Social unpredictability. They thought it was dangerous. We thought it was potential." "You're rogue assets," Krivaktal realized aloud. "No," Juno corrected. "We're free agents." Liek stumbled back to a wall panel, trying to access an auxiliary feed. It sparked and fizzled. The ship's network rejected his presence like a virus. "They've quarantined us," he said quietly. "We're not cruel," said Juno. "You'll be alive. You'll watch. We want you to witness what comes next." You think we'll just let you go? Krivaktul spat. You think the Empire will ignore this? You won't be able to find us again, said Callahan. We're not using space the way you do. Not anymore. Krivaktul spun. Explain. Juno held up a small fragment of shattered metal, part of the hull that had broken during their initial capture. You think of space as distance, points, coordinates. We reframe it as condition. If the system state is precise, you don't need engines. You just become where you want to be. His claws trembled slightly. You're manipulating phase matter transitions. We're folding state vectors, she said. And we're not done learning. Krivaktul staggered, stunned not just by the implications but by the underlying horror. The Dominion hadn't been infiltrated by spies or overrun by brute force. It was being redefined from within. Human unpredictability wasn't a weakness. It was an evolutionary weapon. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Juno considered. We want your silence. Your empire cannot prepare for us if it doesn't understand us. And you don't. You'll trigger war, he warned. You already did, she replied. This is the fallout. The ship's internal hum deepened. The lights grew softer. Something unseen shifted in the air, like a change in pressure, in orientation. As if the entire vessel was breathing with a new rhythm. Lek whispered, We're not in phase space anymore. Correct, said Callahan. We're between layers. No coordinates. No time. Just pattern. Juno turned to Krivaktul one last time. You should be proud. You caught the future in its larval stage. You just didn't know what you were looking at. Then the room dissolved. Not physically, perceptually. Interfaces blinked out. Walls shimmered into abstract patterns. For a moment, reality itself seemed thin, uncertain, like a canvas halfway erased. Then it reformed. Crisper, stranger, cleaner. They stood in a new chamber, a design unlike any Dominion structure. Organic in form, modular in material, pulsing faintly with purpose. Krivaktul realized he was inside the same ship, but it had reconfigured itself. Around them, Juno and her team moved as one. No spoken word. No visible command. Just unity in motion. Krivaktul fell to his knees, not in pain, but in awe. Somewhere in his brain, the seeds of something alien stirred. Not fear, not hatred, understanding, and it terrified him. The Dominion retrieval ship pierced real space in a silent ripple, its hull slick with void condensation and its prow glowing with the heat of re-entry. It had been summoned not by a beacon, but by silence, a sudden black spot where the Vornax vengeance had been transmitting telemetry. No wreckage, no distress, just a void of data. In the Dominion, such silence meant one thing: containment breach. High Executor Varkeen stepped onto the command bridge of the Judicator's Resolve, surrounded by augmented tacticians and Neuralink strategists, each embedded with predictive war logic implants. His eyes flickered with synthetic overlays, translating possibility into probability in real time. 3 vessels had gone missing near the same region. The pattern was unacceptable. He narrowed his gaze at the anomaly's coordinates, floating in space like a scar across the map. He expected debris. He expected interference. He didn't expect to see the Vornax vengeance return. But it did. It blinked into orbit, unscratched, silent, immaculate, broadcasting full identification codes and passive systems, like a compliant pet returning home. And yet, something in its motion felt off. Not the wrong form, but the wrong rhythm. Inside the vessel, Krivaktul stood at the main viewport, his body still but his mind fractured. Days had passed, or maybe hours. Time meant little in the ship's new configuration. He hadn't been imprisoned. Not in the traditional sense. He was fed, clothed, allowed to walk freely. But freedom in this place was an illusion layered over control so perfect it didn't need chains. The girls had changed again. Not in shape, still recognizably human, but in how they moved, how they communicated. A silent cohesion pulsed between them, like synchronized thoughts bleeding through physical reality. They finished each other's gestures. They reacted before stimuli arrived. The vessel had become an extension of them. Or maybe they had become the vessel. Juno watched the Dominion fleet from a curved viewing membrane, her fingers tapping along invisible patterns that only she could feel. Torres stood beside her, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. Data streamed into her directly, absorbed and processed without visible tech. Callahan floated above them in a low-grav chamber, her limbs relaxed, a soft hum pulsing around her body as if the ship itself cradled her presence. Krivaktul finally spoke, voice hoarse. Why return? Juno didn't look away from the viewport. Because they need to see it. They'll destroy you. She turned calm. No. They'll try to understand us. That's their first mistake. Outside, the Judicator's resolve launched a comms tether. A shimmering beam of encoded data lanced toward the Vengeance. Juno didn't respond. Instead, the ship shifted. Not its physical frame, but its expression, projecting frequencies beyond the visible, emitting patterns into subthought space, bypassing conventional sensors and speaking directly to Dominion cognition. It wasn't communication. It was infection. Varkeen staggered as the data hit. Not just sound or code, but a feeling raw, emotional, chaotic. He saw flashes of memories that weren't his. Fire in a desert. Laughter in ruins. A heartbeat syncing with the recoil of a railgun. He saw faces, human faces, scarred and screaming, but not in fear. In triumph. Shut it off, he ordered, though no one had turned it on. His neural link overloaded momentarily, vomiting contradictory inputs. He was seeing something not yet possible, simulations of Dominion defeat, not in decades but in weeks. Battles lost before they began. Fleets unraveling from internal contradiction. Ships turning inward, logic collapsing. One of his advisors dropped to the floor, sobbing without words. Varkeen forced clarity through his neural rig, engaging deep override protocols. Lock weapons. Prepare annihilation protocol. Burn that ship from the stars. Inside the Vengeance, Juno smiled. They'll fire, Krivaktul warned. They've seen what you are. Good, said Juno. Now they'll understand why they can't stop us. Callahan pulsed a thought into the ship, and the Vengeance responded. Its hull refracted light unnaturally. Reality warped around it. Not cloaking rejection. The ship no longer belonged to this set of physical laws. It danced between possible positions, quantum footsteps on a board the Dominion couldn't see. The first salvo arrived. 10 plasma torpedoes, each designed to breach fortress worlds, screamed toward the target. They didn't miss. They simply ceased to exist. No explosion. No impact. Just null. The torpedoes reached the event horizon of something not fully real, and were erased. An offensive gone not to failure, but to silence. Varkeen recoiled. Deploy the Forge Sentinels. All of them. Krivaktul pressed a hand to the viewport. You don't have to do this. You've proved your point. Leave. Juno tilted her head. We haven't made our point yet. Hundreds of Forge Sentinels, a hybrid of AI-piloted dreadnoughts and organic biomass, emerged from the Judicator's flank. Each one was its own war fleet. Alone, they could level planets. Together, they had shattered empires. The girls didn't flinch. Torres whispered, pattern lock achieved. Initiating harmony breach. The Vengeance emitted no weapons. No shields activated. Instead, the air in space vibrated. An impossible pulse rippled through vacuum like a musical note too deep to hear, but powerful enough to reconfigure molecular bindings. The Forge Sentinels slowed. They drifted, and then they began firing at each other. One by one, Dominion vessels lit up with betrayal, cannons tearing into sibling cores, weapons cascading through shared networks. Strategic protocols failed as AI subroutines realigned to human logic seeds embedded in their command mesh. They're folding your AI decision trees into ours, Juno said calmly. Not reprogramming, reframing. Your machines think they're making the correct move. And they are, just not for your empire anymore. On the Judicator's resolve, Varkeen screamed orders, but his command nodes no longer listened. His link went dark. A chill crawled down his spine, deeper than fear. He saw his empire for what it truly was, brittle, rigid, unable to adapt. The vengeance drifted through the chaos without harm. Krivaktul stepped back. What are you becoming? Juno turned to him. What you never expected. A distributed intelligence made of mistakes. A tactical network born of chaos. Every failure you inflicted on us became the scaffolding of our evolution. Torres chimed in. You kept calling us female soldiers like it explained everything. But gender was never the variable. Context was. You underestimated who we were, Juno added. Because you didn't understand how we think. You were looking for war doctrine. We used memory, emotion, loss. Callahan closed her eyes. That was our code base. Krivaktul dropped into a chair, breathing unevenly. This is a mutagen. You've infected the Dominion with your thought pattern. Not infected, said Juno. Inspired. Some will resist. Others will adapt. Either way, the Empire won't survive this unchanged. The Vengeance opened a phase aperture mid-orbit, one that defied physics without propulsion or coordinates. It simply opened, like a tear in causality. We're leaving now, Juno said. But the seeds planted. Krivaktul looked up. Where will you go? She paused, thoughtful. To find others like us. Not just humans. Anyone discarded. Anyone underestimated. And when you return? Her gaze was distant, her voice almost soft. Then we'll build something better. The aperture widened, consuming the vessel with impossible grace. The Dominion fleet hung motionless, a broken machine of logic devoured by paradox. Varkeen watched powerless. And far beyond the reach of his fleet, the story began to spread. Encrypted whispers through data wraiths, smuggled memes across interstellar bandwidths. Not about defeat, but about change. About an empire that caught 7 forgotten girls and accidentally gave them the keys to ascendancy. There was no explosion, no victory cry, just silence. And then the quiet, creeping thought inside every Dominion officer's mind. What if this is only the beginning? The Dominion had fallen silent in its wake. A far-off rippling wave, an invisible tremor, reached every corner of its empire. No one had expected the Vengeance to return. No one had predicted the quiet revolution that would spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Dominion's own creations. It wasn't about firepower, but the way the breach in their control had been seeded. The Dominion had not been crushed, they had been redefined. Krivaktul sat at the edge of the command table, his hands trembling. He no longer wore his commanding uniform, but instead a simple flight suit, its markings now irrelevant. His place among the Dominion hierarchy had dissolved. Not because of battle damage, not because of loss, but because he had seen firsthand how a single moment of failure could ripple outward in ways no one could fully understand. He looked at Juno, Torres, Callahan, and the others. They no longer resembled the soldiers they had once been. They had transcended that. They were not human. Not in the way Varkeen had thought. Not in the way he had tried to break them. They were now a new species of being, one made of logic and emotion, memory and anticipation, control and chaos. Their power wasn't in their ability to win, but in their ability to evolve faster than anyone could keep up with. I failed, Krivaktul muttered under his breath, but his words carried no real weight. He was still processing the unraveling of everything he had known. No, Juno replied, her voice unwavering, calm in its certainty. You didn't fail, Krivaktul. You were part of something that failed. The Dominion failed itself. But I was supposed to stop you, he said, still not understanding. The machines were supposed to handle you. Machines? Torres interjected. Machines aren't you. They're not us. We didn't come from a data core. We came from something real. Something imperfect. And that's why you lost? Callahan added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Your empire could never adapt. You didn't leave room for the unknown. Krivaktul blinked, the words spinning in his mind. This wasn't just about him or his failure. This was the entire empire breaking down under its own rigidity. But if we adapt, if we embrace this, his voice faltered. Juno reached out and placed a hand on the table. Then you'd be asking what we've been asking. What does it mean to be truly free? Not just physically, but mentally, culturally, philosophically. The Dominion has always prided itself on control. You want to make us just like you. You thought your machines could handle us. But what we are, Krivaktul, is the next step. The room fell quiet. Krivaktul was caught between fear and curiosity. He had seen what they had done to the Forge Sentinels, how they had turned his own creations against him. But it wasn't just that. It was the understanding, the dawning realization, that these humans, these girls, had evolved so rapidly, had turned everything upside down, simply by thinking differently. "I thought we were in control," he whispered, a note of defeat in his voice. "You were," Juno said softly, "until you forgot that control is an illusion. It's an idea you tell yourself to keep the world in order. But you never thought about the consequences of limiting freedom. What happens when those who you think are beneath you break free of your constraints?" Krivaktul closed his eyes, the weight of her words heavy on him. The Dominion had never considered this. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and they had built an empire on the belief that their logic and control could prevent any chaos. But chaos had found them, and they hadn't even realized it was already inside their own design. "Now what?" Krivaktul asked, his voice almost a whisper. "We move forward," Torres answered. "We don't stop. This," she gestured to the space around them, "is only the beginning." There was no grand declaration, no hero's speech, just the quiet certainty that they had reached a turning point, one that the Dominion could never recover from. The vengeance had left a scar on the very heart of the Empire. "You've seen it, Krivaktul," Juno continued. "The way we think, the way we adapt. You can fight against us, you can try to contain us, but we'll always find a way. And we'll never go back." "Back?" he asked, almost to himself. "To what?" "To your version of control," she said, her voice hardening with the weight of finality. "To your rigid lines and structured logic. To your belief that everything fits into a box, that everything can be understood and controlled. That belief is what kills you." Krivaktul stood up abruptly, a flash of something. Fear? In his eyes. He had no retort. The air around him felt too thick. The truth hung in the space between them, too heavy to be ignored. "You're asking me to change." "We're not asking," Callahan said. "We're showing you." And with that, the realization hit him again. The Dominion had never been about building something better. It was about keeping control. And in that pursuit, it had left no room for true growth, for evolution, for change. Juno looked at him one final time, her expression unreadable. "The future doesn't belong to the ones who maintain power. It belongs to the ones who evolve. We won't be the last to break free, Krivaktul. We won't be the last to understand that change is the only constant. You'll see. Eventually." Without waiting for his response, she turned her attention back to the ship systems. The crew stood together in a moment of shared silence. No one spoke, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the words no longer mattered. The future had been rewritten, and it was moving faster than any of them could comprehend. The Vengeance hummed to life, its systems shifting and evolving in real time, adapting to the environment in ways that would have been impossible just days ago. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, Krivaktul stood motionless at the edge of the command deck, watching the stars. This was the new reality. The Dominion would never again be the force it once was. They would try to adapt, try to fight back, but it would always be too late. Because in the end, they had underestimated what humans, and now these girls, could do. They had underestimated change. And that, above all else, would be their downfall. Far in the distance, a faint signal flickered on the farthest edge of Dominion space. It was a whisper, a message from an unseen part of the universe. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was a question. "Who are you now?" And the girls of the Vengeance knew the answer. even as they sailed toward the unknown. We are the future.